this episode, we're going to make the exam environment feel predictable by turning scoring, timing, and proctoring into things you can plan for rather than things you fear. A lot of people study the content but do not study the test itself, and that is a problem because unfamiliar rules create stress, and stress causes careless errors. When you understand what scoring is really doing, how time pressure changes your reading, and how proctoring can interrupt your rhythm if you are not prepared, you can build a calmer, more deliberate exam day approach. The goal is not to turn you into someone who obsessively worries about logistics, but to help you remove surprise from the day so your brain can spend its energy on reasoning. Hidden pitfalls are usually not secret tricks. They are predictable ways people lose points because they misread what a question is asking, mismanage their time, or break focus when something unexpected happens. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at CyberLive in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Scoring is easiest to understand when you treat every question as a chance to demonstrate correct judgment, not as a negotiation with the test maker. Most certification exams use a fixed number of questions and count how many you get right. And even when there are behind-the-scenes details, you should assume a simple rule. You only earn points for correct answers, and you do not earn points for partial understanding. That means you should avoid a habit where you talk yourself into an answer you cannot defend, because confidence without justification is not rewarded. It also means you should not waste time trying to guess whether a question is worth more than another question, because that speculation usually cannot be verified and it steals time from reading carefully. Your job is to be consistently accurate, and that comes from disciplined comprehension and disciplined elimination of wrong choices. The most valuable scoring mindset is that every question deserves your best reasoning process, even if you are not sure of the final answer. A beginner-friendly way to think about scoring is to separate what you control from what you do not control. You control how carefully you read, how you manage your pace, and how you make decisions under uncertainty. You do not control whether a question feels easy or hard, whether the wording is awkward, or whether two options seem similar. If you focus on what you cannot control, your attention drifts into frustration and you burn time. If you focus on what you can control, you build a repeatable method that works even when a question feels uncomfortable. This is especially important in threat intelligence, where questions often describe imperfect information, and your job is to pick the best supported conclusion, not the most exciting conclusion. When you adopt that mindset, scoring becomes less mysterious because you are simply aiming for reliable correctness. Timing is where most beginners quietly lose the most points, not because they do not know the content, but because they cannot maintain clear thinking for the entire session. Time pressure changes how your brain reads, and the most common effect is that you start skimming, you start assuming, and you start missing small words that reverse meaning. Words like best, most likely, first, and primarily can completely change the correct answer, but when you feel rushed, your eyes slide right past them. The antidote is not to read slower everywhere, because that can also be a trap. The antidote is to read deliberately where it matters and to keep a steady pace overall. A steady pace means you do not sprint early and crash late, and you do not crawl early and then panic at the end. You want the test to feel like a long, calm walk where you always know where you are in relation to the finish line. One practical timing skill is learning to recognize early when a question is becoming a time sink. Some questions are straightforward if you see the key idea quickly, and some questions require you to weigh subtle trade-offs. If you notice you are rereading the same sentence multiple times without improving your clarity, that is a signal that you are stuck, not a signal that you should keep grinding. In intelligence work, when analysis stalls, a common move is to step back, restate the requirement, and look again at the evidence. You can do the same here by identifying what the question is truly asking, then scanning the answer choices for the one that best aligns to that ask. If that still does not unlock the question, you make your best current choice, mark it mentally, and move on so you protect time for all the other questions. This is not giving up. It is managing limited resources in a rational way. To decode timing well, you also want to understand how to pace yourself without constantly checking the clock. Constant clock checking creates anxiety, and anxiety makes your reading worse, which creates a loop that harms performance. A better approach is to use periodic checkpoints, where you glance at time only at a few planned moments and compare progress to a simple expectation. If you are ahead, you do not celebrate and slow down. You keep the same calm method because the exam can get harder later. If you are behind, you do not panic. You tighten your process by answering the easy questions quickly and refusing to wrestle with one stubborn item for too long. Your goal is to preserve accuracy while keeping motion, because accuracy without completion leaves questions unanswered, and completion without accuracy leaves points on the table. When you learn to pace like this, the exam becomes far less emotionally intense. Proctoring is another area where hidden pitfalls appear because people do not rehearse the environment. Proctoring exists to protect the integrity of the exam, and that means your workspace, your behavior, and your device usage are usually constrained. If you are surprised by those constraints on exam day, you lose focus and time. A good way to think about proctoring is to treat it like entering a controlled room where the rules are strict and the goal is to avoid anything that looks suspicious, even if it is innocent. That means planning your space, controlling interruptions, and having a clear routine for what you do if you need help from the proctor. You do not want to improvise in the moment, because improvisation often looks like rule-breaking when viewed from outside. The best proctoring strategy is quiet, predictable behavior. A common proctoring pitfall is unintended movement that breaks the rules, like repeatedly looking away from the screen or speaking out loud when you are thinking. Some people naturally read questions aloud or whisper to themselves, and they do not realize that this can be flagged in a monitored environment. Other people glance toward a second monitor that is turned off, or toward a window, and they do not realize how that might appear. Even if you are doing nothing wrong, the interruption that follows can break your concentration and waste minutes. The safest approach is to train yourself to keep your attention on the screen, keep your hands calm, and keep your workspace clean of anything that could look like notes. If you are used to fidgeting while thinking, practice stillness during your study sessions so your exam day behavior feels natural rather than forced. Another proctoring-related pitfall is technical friction, which can be frustrating because it feels unrelated to the content. If your device, network, or environment is unstable, you can lose time, and worse, you can lose your mental rhythm. Beginners sometimes assume the exam experience will be smooth because it is professional, but the reality is that anything involving software, cameras, and network connections can have occasional hiccups. The best defense is preparation that reduces the chance of issues and reduces the emotional impact if they happen anyway. That means ensuring your space is quiet, your device is reliable, your power is stable, and your internet connection is steady. If an issue occurs, the goal is to stay calm and follow the proctor's instructions, because panic leads to rushed choices once you return to the questions. Now we can talk about hidden pitfalls that are not about proctoring or time, but about how the exam is written and how beginners interpret it. One pitfall is assuming the exam wants the most aggressive or dramatic response to a scenario, because cybersecurity storytelling often celebrates heroic actions. Threat intelligence, however, values disciplined reasoning and relevance to stakeholder decisions, and many questions are designed to reward restraint. If a scenario describes uncertain indicators, the best answer is often to validate, add context, and communicate confidence rather than to declare a major incident. If a scenario describes a vague stakeholder request, the best answer is often to refine the requirement rather than to collect everything. If a scenario describes a large data set, the best answer is often to normalize and prioritize rather than to chase every signal. The hidden trap is that exciting answers can feel correct emotionally even when they are wrong logically. Another pitfall is confusing vocabulary that sounds similar, especially when you are new. Threat intelligence involves terms like indicator, evidence, assessment, requirement, confidence, and relevance, and the exam can ask you to distinguish them. When a question asks for an intelligence requirement, it is not asking for a random curiosity. It is asking for a statement that guides collection and analysis toward a decision. When a question asks for confidence, it is not asking whether you feel good. It is asking whether the evidence supports the claim strongly, moderately, or weakly. When a question asks for relevance, it is not asking whether the data is interesting. It is asking whether the data changes what a stakeholder should do. If you slow down long enough to match the term to its intended meaning, many confusing questions become much easier. A particularly sneaky pitfall involves the difference between what is true and what is useful, because intelligence is about usefulness under constraints. You can have a fact that is technically true but irrelevant to the decision at hand, and the exam will often tempt you with those kinds of options. For example, a detailed technical description might be accurate, but if the question is asking what to do next in the cycle, accuracy alone is not the target. Another option might be less detailed but more aligned to the requirement, more feasible to execute, or more likely to produce actionable output. Beginners sometimes overvalue detail because detail feels like expertise, but intelligence expertise often shows up as clarity and prioritization. The exam rewards the ability to make a defensible choice that fits the problem, not the ability to show off trivia. You also want to be careful about absolute language and answer choices, because exams often include options that sound confident but are too extreme to be correct. Words like always, never, guaranteed, and impossible are dangerous in security contexts because security is full of uncertainty and exceptions. A mature intelligence answer tends to acknowledge limitations and to support claims with evidence and context. That does not mean the correct answer will always be cautious, but it does mean you should be suspicious of answers that promise certainty without acknowledging trade-offs. When you see an extreme option, ask yourself whether it violates the reality of intelligence work, where sources can be wrong, data can be incomplete, and adversaries can adapt. Often, the best choice is the one that is balanced, evidence-driven, and aligned to decision support. Another hidden pitfall is letting fatigue change how you read near the end of the exam. Even if you manage time well, your brain can become less precise after a long stretch of focused reading, and that is when you start making avoidable mistakes. Fatigue leads to skipping the stem and jumping straight to the answers, or it leads to choosing the first option that sounds familiar. This is where your pacing strategy matters, because steady pacing reduces late-stage panic, and steady pacing also makes it easier to take small mental resets without losing time. A reset can be as simple as taking one slow breath, relaxing your shoulders, and rereading the question once with the goal of identifying the decision it is asking for. Those tiny resets can protect you from the most costly errors, which are not content gaps, but attention slips. When you put all of this together, decoding scoring, timing, and proctoring becomes less about memorizing rules and more about building a stable exam day operating system. You want a method that keeps you calm, keeps you moving, and keeps you honest about what the question is truly asking. You want to recognize when you are stuck and recover quickly without spiraling. You want to avoid behaviors that trigger proctor interruptions, and you want your environment to be so prepared that you barely notice it. Most importantly, you want to remember that hidden pitfalls are usually predictable patterns, like misreading a keyword, chasing irrelevant detail, or overreacting to uncertainty. If you train your approach to avoid those patterns, you are not just preparing to pass. You are practicing the kind of disciplined thinking that threat intelligence is meant to build.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.